here today as we pay honor and homage to the nearly 200,000 black soldiers that served in the Union Army, many of which lie here. Understand, my friends, I was a man who had to change my mind about several subjects. Early in my political career, when I was constantly saying, well, all men are created equal, I would take a beat and say, the black man is my equal in many respects, but certainly not in intellect. You see, that's what I had been taught. But then, I met some intellectual black men, the most important of which was Frederick Douglass, the great abolitionist. I was never able to look at the black man the same way again. In October of 1862, when the war was at one of its many low points, I had a conversation with a group of black clergymen in my office. Whether it was out of depression, whether it was out of worry, somewhere during this conversation, I looked at these black clergymen and I said, well, gentlemen, without your race among us, this war could have never existed, which they promptly chastised me for when they reminded me that, Mr. President, we did not ask to be here. You brought us here. I had to change my mind on many subjects. I wrote a letter to a group of friends in Illinois one time who were disappointed with my Emancipation Proclamation. And in part of that letter, I said this: when this war is over, there are going to be some black men who will always remember that with a silent tongue, clenched teeth, and a well-poised bayonet, they helped this nation on to a great consummation. While I'm afraid that there are going to be some white men who will never be able to forget that with a malicious heart and deceitful mind, they struggled to destroy. Mr. Douglass and I had several meetings. I will never forget, in one of those, he said, Mr. Lincoln, why in the world would you fight this terrible war with your good white hand and leave your good black hand behind you? When a man is drowning in the river, he cares not the color of the hand that saves him. These black soldiers proved to the entire world that all men are created equal. They fought not for their freedom, not even for their children's freedom, but their grandchildren and their great-grandchildren. Ladies and gentlemen, 28 black soldiers and sailors received the highest award that this nation can ever do, where, if I'm not mistaken, no black soldiers were interred at that time. I was not the main speaker. That job went to someone else. He spoke to the crowd that morning for 2 hours. It was a great speech. I spoke to the people a little less than 2.5 minutes. And this is what I said. 87 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now, we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives that that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here, have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us the living, rather to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. It's rather that we be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead, we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion, that we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, and that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. God bless.
Thank you.
God bless America.
Thank you, Dennis. That's a wonderful 2.5